Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming this evening. Councillor Adshade, you have the motion for Council to move out of closed session. Trying to call it up there.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wolf, that Council rise from closed session and reconvene in open session at 5:55.
Thank you. I'm going to call the question. All those in favour? And that motion's carried. We have come out of closed session, and what that means is that we were in a meeting, in a properly constituted closed meeting about specific issues which we've discussed, and we've now come out of closed and we're now in open session. The first item on our agenda is regarding Bill 66, Restoring Ontario's Competitiveness Act 2018. And we'll have one delegation that wishes to speak to this. Stephanie Sobok-Swant from Charitable Research Reserve. Do I see her in the audience? There you are. Please come forward.
Thank you. Is our PowerPoint presentation ready? Excellent. Thank you so much for having me present here tonight. I am particularly honored tonight that I'm not just speaking on behalf of RARE, I'm also speaking as a community member here in Cambridge and Waterloo region, and I'm also speaking on behalf of a number of other environmental groups and smart growth groups in Waterloo region, and a number of people are with me here today who are concerned citizens, and we would like to have our voices heard regarding our concerns of the proposed Bill 66. So our request today to Council is that a resolution will be passed which reaffirms Cambridge's commitment to smart growth and meaningful public consultations, and that also, in addition to that, requests that the Government of Ontario does not pass Section 10 of Bill 66, and we also request that the resolution will commit to not passing an open for business planning bylaw should Section 10 become law indeed. So why is all of this important to us? So why Section 10 of Bill 66? So essentially what is being proposed with this bill is that it upends traditional land use planning with the introduction of what they call an open for business bylaw. In my opinion, it's more like opening Pandora's box. So essentially, as part of this proposal for Restoring Ontario's Competitiveness Act, this bill would allow for developments that don't follow the laws that protect our water that we have currently in place in our agriculture and community development plans. For example, the existing Clean Water Act and Places to Grow. It's also very concerning that there would be no public consultation required under this section, and it also does not define the type of jobs that would be created, which is one of the pros that is being tossed around why this Competitiveness Act should be introduced. But it could mean that it's simply construction jobs, temporary or really low-wage jobs, and nothing of real permanence or significance. And Bill 66 is also really such a broad, sweeping bill that it's broad enough to leave open the possibility of other future exemptions, including for residential development and types of development that really require much better scrutiny and process. So, the problems with Section 10 of Bill 66 and why we actually don't need it. Because in our area here, unemployment fell from 5.9% to 5.1% since the Regional Growth Management Strategy was adopted in 2003. And in fact, we have ample vacant employment land that already exists, and this bill would mean a devaluation of large blocks of existing employment lands, and also any dependability in employment land use planning will be gone. And that is really concerning. It would also create a patchwork, which means if all these sites could be developed, it would affect not only this community here, but neighboring municipalities as well, as pollution flows downstream and downwind, and and it's really key that there remains coordination within the greater Golden Horseshoe area and the region of Waterloo. And there's really a big risk here that this will lead to further degradation of groundwater, environmental lands, prime agricultural soils that need our protection, and we have done as a community here a really great job to have those levels of protections in place, and we really depend on our supply of clean water in particular. I think I don't need to remind you of Walkerton or the situation we had in Elmira. And furthermore, what I find one of the most concerning things is that there is no public notice, consultation, and participation required, which are really core of our democracy. So personally, I see these suggestions as really undemocratic, in addition to there not being any inter-municipal consultations and review or appeal rights either. So I do think if the government feels that public participation is a roadblock to economic development in this region here in Cambridge in particular, I almost find that personally insulting. I moved here for a good reason. I'm raising my family here, and the reason is there are good opportunities for us here to grow as a family, and there's also intact environmental lands that we can enjoy in our spare time and that we depend on for our health and for everyone's public health. So what we would like to do is we need you to stand up as the leaders in protection of water, rural areas, and environmentally sensitive lands and smart growth. And I'm firmly believing that together we can attract business while maintaining the countryside line and the protected countrysides and the environmentally sensitive and significant landscapes. And really, we at RARE here in Cambridge have already shown that we attract a whole new economy of young people who have excellent educations and to excellent research here. And really the changing shape of our communities must be strategic going forward. It cannot be opportunistic, and it has to be guided by meaningful public consultation and long-term planning. So therefore, we need to step up and voice our concern and show really strengths, and cannot propose or support anything that entirely eliminates public engagement and decision making. So therefore, we have proposed a resolution for you to consider, which I hear is very similar to something that you have prepared already, so I will only go briefly over it. Essentially, we would like to have resolved that the city will oppose planned changes to the Planning Act as proposed in Bill 66 that may allow for an open for business planning bylaw, and also that the Government of Ontario be requested to reconsider the proposed changes to the Planning Act included in Bill 66, particularly the ones which speak to the creation of the Open for Business Planning bylaw. And furthermore, it be resolved that a copy of this motion be sent to the Honourable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, and related party members. And it be further resolved that a copy of this motion also be sent to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, the AMO, and all Ontario municipalities for their consideration. And finally, and most importantly of all, it should be further resolved that notwithstanding the future adoption of Bill 66, the City of Cambridge will not exercise the powers granted to it in Schedule 10 or any successor sections or schedules to pass Open for Business Planning bylaw. Thank you so much for considering our concerns and our proposal, and thank you for your help.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions, if you wouldn't mind staying there. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, you mentioned that that we are going to bring forward a motion, and I understand that that is going to happen. But I wondered also, in addition to thanking you very much for this presentation and for taking the time to come here and talk to us about it, because it is an issue that strikes at the very heart of who we are and what we are as a city, and that we have spent considerable time trying to look after this city and our environmentally sensitive areas, and in addition look after our water. And so you know, to have someone come and tell us that we're doing some good things and we should continue to do some good things is always good. But I'm wondering if beyond passing a bylaw or a motion tonight, is there anything else that you think we could do as a council to preserve what we consider very important?
I think we're already in a good position that we have, as an organization, a good working relationship with Council. I think that also shows that a lot of the things that would be taken away as part of this bill are really important, because the public consultation process and us working with the community, I think, will be a key piece going forward. We have seen it many times here in Cambridge. The community feels very strongly about that, very strongly about having that opportunity for public consultation and weighing in. So I think it's a key fundamental piece of how we all work here together in Cambridge. So I would like to see that preserved under any circumstance. I think there's a good opportunity here tonight to show that right message to the community. And I know there have already presentations been made to other city councils, the region, and most of the township councils. And I think we have so far all stood united in our approach to this, which is amazing. Thank you.
Councillor Abshay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Stephanie, thanks so much for the presentation and for pointing out what's going on with Bill 66. I'm just wondering if you could take a minute and explain and get out into the open and to the public, explain how Bill 66 is allowing the green belt or environmentally sensitive lands. How is that public consultation? How does the bill prevent proper public consultation?
Well, essentially what is proposed as part for this open for business plan, it could mean that any lands that a developer likes to develop for business and economic growth development could be developed without those usual mechanisms that we have in place. So it means it can go into areas that are currently not designated as such, and that in fact currently have other designations that would prevent development from happening there.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
You've always been a great advocate.
Thank you.
Instead of moving forward with this, the rest of this particular item at the moment, Council, with your permission, there's some time restraints from a couple of our delegates for the next presentation. So I'm going to ask, with your permission, that we'll move to the second item, which we'll be discussing, which is the recreational retail cannabis. And we have our Director of Corporate Strategy, Brooke Lambert, here, who will present after the police, if that's okay. She was all set, I know. But I'm going to ask our police chief, Brian Larkin, to come in and make a presentation so he doesn't have to speed to his next appointment.
Thanks so much, Your Worship, Mayor McGarry, members of council. Thank you for your kindness, and was going to start with, in support of the Director's Strategy, Ms. Lambert's report. We're here to support it, but I do want to take an opportunity to bring New Year's greetings. It's always great to be in the city of Cambridge, and thank you for your continued support. I'm joined this evening by Acting Deputy Chief Shirley Hilton, who oversees our neighborhood policing and our investigations, and previously served overseeing our investigative services area, which led the drugs and firearms intelligence and organized crime strategies. Also joined by Superintendent Michael Hafner, who's the divisional leader of the South Division that serves the city of Cambridge. And so thank you for the opportunity to speak about the retail piece. I think, as council is well aware, on October 17th, 2018, we saw probably one of the largest significant public policy shifts in Canada, which was the federal implementation and the end of prohibition of cannabis in our country. And so it's a pretty significant piece, and that piece of legislation was really themed under two main items. One was to ensure that young people are protected from cannabis, from illicit drug use. The second piece was really themed around ensuring that we begin and continue to combat organized crime, which was largely fueling much of the illicit distribution of cannabis. As council's aware, you know, from much of the cannabis work that was done by the federal government, is that Canada regrettably has one of the highest uses of cannabis amongst young people ages 12 to 24, and I think we should pause to think about that as we move forward. I want to talk a little bit about the reasons why the police service is recommending and supporting the staff report. As you're aware, we are making our way through the region and want to highlight that this has been a collaborative piece where we've had a lot of consultation with the City of Cambridge staff as well as other municipalities and the region as well. And there's a couple of key pieces for us as a police service, and one of those obviously is a regulated framework. And so the Ontario and Canadian Association of Chiefs have worked very closely with government around advancing a change in public policy, and one of the key pieces is safe supply. The reality is that people use cannabis, and a regulated retail operation, although our preference was a government-run regulation and it's moving towards a privatized sale, we have to move past that and recognize that even in the current legislation, the Cannabis Act, it does ensure that the product is controlled. So from seed to plant sale, the province, the federal government controls every single aspect. There's quality assurance. When we go to a controlled retail sales piece, we obviously know that there's those companies and those owners are subject to significant background investigations prior to receiving the license. We also know that there'll be controlled training, etc. They'll be subject to Alcohol and Gaming Commission inspection, subject to municipal bylaw inspection, and also then subject to police oversight. And I think if you look at the current model of the AGCO and beer store and LCBO and governed retail stores, all of those partners, the AGCO, the municipal bylaw, the police service, have an excellent working partnership, as well as also be subject to, for example, fire inspection and other business licensing. And so that's a really key piece for us when you look at that process. The other major piece as to why we support the retail piece, I mean, it's obviously something that we're very concerned about, which is illegal dispensaries. And across our region, we've not been immune to illegal dispensaries. At any given time, we've dealt with 10 to 12 illegal dispensaries. You know, currently within the City of Cambridge, we're aware that there's 2 illegal dispensaries that are currently operating, and we try to deal with those through compliance and as this council is well aware, there's numerous dispensaries that we've dealt with on a number of occasions, but the reality is it does draw policing resources, valuable resources, where we're very focused on a different drug strategy, and that is targeting mid-level and high-level traffickers of other illicit drugs. We continue to deal with a regional challenge of opiate and fentanyl, substance abuse and addiction challenges, and so hence we want to ensure that illegal dispensaries, which are part, and we believe, funded by organized crime. It also allows us to monitor retail stores. And unfortunately, we recognize that the municipality is limited around location, and that's unfortunate, but there is obviously some components there that you'll see. And so we're trying to limit the impact on the policing system. It allows us to prioritize on other issues, and the reality is that as we move forward, we will receive a minimal provincial funding from the government. We'll have one officer assigned to a West Region enforcement team that will focus on illegal dispensaries as well as organized crime. But as you're aware, the West Region is quite large, running from the Niagara area to the Windsor corridor to the Manitoulin corridor, but we will have a full-time officer assigned to that, will allow us to manage what's happening across the province. And so, subject to any questions, really here to support the staff report, which does recommend an opt-in into retail stores. We recognize that there is, again, some minimal financial opportunities in the first year and in the second year, but as we move forward, it will allow us to ensure that safe supply, harm reduction, and integrated strategy. I want to close with this. In having the police service here supporting or recommending opting in is not a notion of normalizing substance abuse. In fact, we don't support perpetual drug use. In fact, we disagree with it. We don't think it's a healthy lifestyle. We don't think that we know that there's health impacts. The reality is that we're dealing with another legal substance, and we believe, the police service has been recommending this at every council we go to, is we should pause for a moment and look at a larger strategy around healthcare, a larger strategy about how do we ensure that the young person who's making their way through middle school or high school, why do they actually need to use some substance to cope with the challenges of a young person? There's more work to be done. The one piece of the Cannabis Act that we believe, chiefs of police federally and provincially, that's missing is a larger healthcare component around ensuring that our young people lead a healthy lifestyle, a resilient lifestyle, and of course we're very focused on road safety, but that's not the reason why we're here. So subject to any questions, I want to thank you for the opportunity, and also thank you for your kindness in adjusting the schedule so we can make it to Woolwich.
Thank you so much, Chief Larkin. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Adshade.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Brian, thanks for your presentation, and I agree with your statement about that for safety reasons and for the black market, I think we need to opt in. But I have some real concerns about the way the legislation is now. I personally preferred the LCBO model. Also, my concern is, and I want your thoughts from a police perspective, is we don't know where the sites are going to be or what the limit is. So do you have any concern regarding that? And also about the 15-day public consultation. To me, that's certainly not enough time to really have the public engaged or give any agencies time to react or give some response to where these could develop. And so I just want to get your thoughts on that, if that's possible.
Yeah, so I think it's regrettable. I was heavily involved in the cannabis file from a provincial perspective in my role with the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, and we were very open around supporting a government-led controlled model. We think the AGCO model was one that provides and ensures, smart serve training, et cetera, and I think we witness every day our partnership. That being said, we're heading to a private retail model, and I think it's important that we ensure that we work within that framework, but we stay on top of it. We itemize any challenges out of it. The 150-meter piece from schools, we, again, still believe that there's other sensitive areas that, the municipality ought to have control over. And I also recognize that, both school boards have been consulted. We've been in consultation with them. I know that they have a formal opinion that staff will likely share with you. I don't want to steal Brooks' thunder, but the reality is that if we pause for a moment, and the reality of the notion is that currently there's a significant amount of gray market and illegal use of the safe supply perspective, and so hence we got to keep moving the framework forward. The 15 days presents some significant challenges, and for, I think, the council, I think for staff to have proper community consultation and engagement. And I know that, from a police perspective, we're looking at some public policy that we would share with municipalities around, a standard, because, to pull together a response on a location. So, we're looking at what kind of sensitive areas. How do we provide feedback on some of those pieces, whether it's daycare, whether it's a religious institution, a place of faith? Those are all pieces we should have concerns and continue to advocate. The Ontario Chiefs, I can tell you, continue to advocate. We recognize that much of this is moving forward, but we continue to push and our message of let's pause for a second and look at the different pieces. The reality is the lottery license, I think that we're going to see some, there's 7 licenses for West Region. It's not a significant amount, and depending on who you listen to or understand, I mean, the reality to get enough supply into the system, a lawful supply into the system, is likely going to take some time to theme out. And so, if you look initially, the recommendation was 500 to 1,000 stores in Ontario, and the reality is now we're down to 25 across the province. We recognize that the online site is pretty significant in that, but the reality is not all consumers have the ability to access the online site. Not all consumers have a credit card that they can access through the site, and so we also recognize is how do we reduce grey market, safe supply, combat organized crime, deal with some of the, a lot of the person-on-person robberies and different things. Often, all roads lead to drug trafficking. That's the reality.
Seeing no other questions, thank you so much for giving up your time and your presence here. It means a lot to us. I think you've been very well versed on the subject, and I think that the eloquent way that you're able to really take a complex, complicated issue and simplify really what we should be looking at and what's important, I think is good. So thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Worship, and once again, I want to recognize and thank Brooke. We've had a great partnership across the region with all staff members, so thank you very much.
Thank you. And now, Council, we will be hearing from our Director of Corporate Strategy, Brooke Lambert. Thank you. Brooke, welcome.
Good evening. Well, thank you, Mayor McGarry and members of Council. I am pleased to be here tonight on behalf of the many staff that have assisted in the preparation of this report for your consideration tonight. Today, I will be providing an overview of the work completed to date with respect to the decision of whether or not to allow for the retail sales of recreational cannabis in physical locations within the City of Cambridge. This presentation includes information on the retail framework that has been established, key dates, phasing and regulation, provincial funding, and a proposed cannabis policy. As you know, the work on this issue began in earnest several years ago when it became evident that the federal government was serious in its intention to legalize the use of recreational cannabis across the country. Over the past several years, we have been working with a collaborative municipal working group that was established to come to some general consensus on a potential regional approach to cannabis related to this decision, the opting in and opting out, the adoption of a policy statement, and looking at the potential for smoking bylaw and related enforcement. There are several important dates and timelines that were mentioned just by the Chief, but also that you're likely familiar with, that have gotten us to this date. So on October the 17th, cannabis became legal and the Smoke-Free Ontario Act was amended. December 17th, the licensing opportunities opened from the AGCO. And just very recently, the AGCO did hold the lottery where expression of interest for interested retailers was held. This closed on January 11th, and the results for those 7 licenses, including those for the West region, were reported on the website, the AGCO website. So this week and over the past the last week and the week going forward, it has been the time when the municipal councils in Waterloo Region are considering this decision. Kitchener and Waterloo both had their discussions yesterday. Both decided to opt in. And the decision is really due before January the 22nd. This is so that the province will be ready to meet the deadline of April the 1st for those first physical store locations. The framework that has been set out is being overseen by the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. It is responsible for the licensing and all the regulatory matters. Now, there are 3 different types of licenses that will be required for each retail shop. One is for the retail operator, which is more of a general license, and that's what the lottery was held for. One is for a retail store location, and those are very site-specific. One is for retail manager licenses, which is person-specific, essentially. Municipalities are not permitted to create specific zoning requirements. Stores must be located within a zone that permits retail, but municipalities do not have the ability to further restrict locations, and as you heard, that is a general concern. Comments must be submitted in accordance with the province's definition of the public interest, and that has been defined by 3 primary components, the first being public health and safety, the second is protecting youth, and the third is eliminating the illegal market. So today's decision is very important. It will decide whether or not Cambridge will allow for those bricks and mortar stores in the city of Cambridge. As mentioned, the scale of the potential retail impact has varied, and we heard numbers of up to 500 to 1,000 stores potentially. But on December the 13th, the province did announce a phased approach in issuing those retail licenses. So the initial phase will include 25 licenses across Ontario, 7 in the West region, which includes Waterloo region. The Alcohol and Gaming Commission implemented the lottery system we mentioned to determine who would be eligible for those initial licenses. And that process just recently completed. Staff across the region have collaborated to prepare the report that is in front of you. Several of the options were evaluated, and there were 3 that were outlined in the report. The first being that Council decide to opt in, the second being that Council decide to opt out, or the third being to opt out initially and opt in later. The information that's been provided has been consistent across the area municipalities, and we thought that was very important because the implications of the Council's decision here would obviously have implications across the region, and that was recognized. The other thing that we are asking Council to consider tonight is looking at creating a Council policy to guide the commenting to the AGCO if Council decides to opt in. And this is very important for several reasons, one being that short turnaround time. We thought you might like to know that out of 187 municipalities that have made a decision to date, approximately 73% have decided to opt in. This includes municipalities like Guelph, Kingston, North Bay, Orangeville, Owen Sound, Peterborough, Kitchener, and Waterloo, as I mentioned. The provincial funding for this is also something that has been a key consideration. And as the framework evolved over time, it did become clear in December that there was some initial funding that would be available to municipalities that chose to opt in. This funding would not be available to the same extent for those that decided not to opt in by the deadline date in January. So the province will be sharing approximately $40 million with municipalities that opt in, $15 million in early January, and we've already received notification from the province as to the allocation of that funding. It's about $64,000 for the City of Cambridge. There will be another $15 million to municipalities that opt in, which would be for the City of Cambridge another $64,000. It's based on a per household funding formula. If the city decides not to opt in, there would be an additional $5,000, but that would be the remaining funding available to the city. There will be $10 million held for unforeseen circumstances by the province, and so how that's allocated has yet to be seen. Some important things to know about the funding is that the funding is meant to help with the rollout of this new cannabis legislation and the enforcement activities that may be related for municipalities. The other part to note is that the province has committed to share some of the excess of, the surplus of excise duty. If there's over $100 million, 50% of that surplus would be shared with municipalities. And we recognize that this funding could be significant, so there's not a lot of details about how this would be shared at this date. But as sales increase, as the legalization of edibles becomes law, likely later in 2019, this funding could be significant. And this slide just shows the breakout of the funding available to this region should all the municipalities decide to opt in. So as you'll see, it's about $64,000 for the City of Cambridge, with the potential for another $64,000 payment if the city decides to opt in. As Chief Larkin mentioned, this report was prepared in consultation with many stakeholders and with staff at the various cities and townships. So we reached out to the universities and colleges, paramedics, public health, fire, the region in terms of their administration, school boards, the LIN, and police. And as you heard from Chief Larkin, the majority of the opinion that was expressed was that they generally supported that the municipalities opt in a consistent manner, and so that's what we've reflected in this report. Several agencies did not provide us with an opinion at this time, but simply, suggested that the consensus would be the best approach across the region. So at this time, staff are recommending that the City of Cambridge opt in for several key reasons. These themes are outlined on this slide here, first being product safety. So the product here will be federally controlled and inspected cannabis, which certainly increases the quality assurance. Economic development. There are several potential economic development opportunities and improving access for consumers in the local market, reducing the need for people to travel to different locations, as well as potential property tax revenue, things like that associated with the stores. There's significant potential for harm reduction and crime reduction in terms of less opportunity for the illegal market, as we heard, less opportunity for contaminated supply. And while the funding from the province is minimal at this point, there is opportunity in the future for the municipality to share in that revenue to help with the enforcement and other activities like public education, safety, and some of those preventative measures that Chief Larkin mentioned. There's the opportunity for job creation in terms of the local employment base, as well as, if should we opt in, more opportunities to rely on some of the enforcement resources that are available from the AGCO and OPPI as required. So as a result, we are recommending that Council permit the establishment of retail stores for recreational cannabis in the City of Cambridge. We are also recommending at this point in time that Council adopt a cannabis policy statement, and what we've called this statement is a commenting criteria policy, essentially. And this would embed the criteria that staff would use to comment on those proposed locations as they become as the information becomes available to staff. There's that 15-day time frame, and we would need to be providing comments on zoning compliance, making sure that it is a retail zone and that it would allow for this type of use. We would be looking at the proximity to schools, and that's the 150-meter radius as per Ontario Reg 46818. We would also suggest that we comment on proximity to post-secondary institutions, city-owned parkland or parkland used for recreational uses by a conservation area, as well as core areas. And those were all criteria that we expressed to the province when they were looking at earlier models in terms of store locations. Those were things that staff and council had identified as sort of municipal priorities. We also want to leave the opportunity open to comment on other sensitive uses. So in that policy includes a list of several other uses such as location to shelters, social services, childcare locations, and those would be uses that we would comment on based on our best available information. Lastly, we are recommending that commenting authority to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario be delegated to the city planner or designate, and this would allow staff to monitor the applications of proposed sites as they come in, undertake the review process as required, consult with any other agencies or any groups that we need to, and prepare those comments based on the council policy that is directed. Lastly, I did want to touch just very briefly on something that, a question that's arisen around consumption restrictions. And it is important to note that cannabis users are permitted to smoke outdoors and in places where cigarette smoking and e-cigarettes are allowed. So this is all outlined under the Smoke-Free Ontario Act, and this Smoke-Free Ontario Act does include several restrictions as well. So there are restrictions for smoking near things like playgrounds, sports fields, recreation facilities, schools. So there's about a 20-meter buffer around those locations where it's not allowed. That said, municipalities can restrict consumption on municipal property and other places if they enact a bylaw. And so in our discussions with the other municipalities and with the region, we noted that currently the Smoke-Free Ontario Act is enforced by the region and their municipal enforcement officers. There's about 2 officers, and they are monitoring calls that are coming in. So we're proposing to continue monitoring the situation, making sure that we have good data on which to look at if additional consumption requirements are needed. And basically, we could come back to council at a later date if another report or update is desirable by council to deal with that issue. But we certainly will be keeping an eye on those things, and likewise our colleagues across the region. That does conclude my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got at least a couple of questions. Thank you very much, Brooke. Councillor Adshade.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Brooke, thanks for the presentation. Just a question in regards to the West. What is the West region? What is that area? Yeah.
The West region essentially extends from Niagara up to Manitoulin to Windsor-Sarnia area.
Okay.
That whole area, it's quite large.
Okay, so then there's only 7 licenses for that whole area. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, and we could follow up, Your Worship? Oh, okay. I know they off now, I guess there's 27 initial in the lottery. Has the province developed any criteria or shared any information as to what's going to happen after this initial 27 storefronts?
Through the chair, no, we haven't heard any information on what will happen following this.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Montero.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, Brooke, can you bring back the what each municipality is going to get? You had Waterloo, Kitchener, Cambridge, and the region of Waterloo. I just got a question on that, just to clarify it. Yeah, that's it. I see that the region, say, gets 275,000, Cambridge 64. It depends on the population. Let's use us for an example. The 175 that we will get, do we share that with the region also? Because the police is under their umbrella, but we do have our bylaw officers that need to be addressed too. So we don't share that?
Through the chair, no, those funding allocations are actually with the region already getting their share of the portion for the region. So the regional share is based on the municipalities that opt in, and that is broken out, assuming everyone opts in, that would be our full amount.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, thank you for the presentation, very comprehensive. I do have a question, though, around where it may be smoked, since that's all that Ontarians are allowed to do at this point in time. And I'm wondering, I wasn't sure in what you presented to us whether the city has the ability to restrict any of the areas where it may be smoked.
Through the chair, yes, the municipality does if it decides to pass a bylaw. Now, one of the things that needs to be considered as part of that discussion is that the region has indicated that if the municipality decides to pass a more restrictive bylaw, meaning more restrictive than what the Smoke-Free Ontario Act already prohibits, that they would not continue to enforce any of our smoking violations. So that would fully come back to the city, so we would need to look at how we would resource that. But it's perfectly within our ability to actually pass a bylaw if we feel it's necessary.
So to follow up, if we were to do that, then we would have to prepare a budget for that.
Through the chair, that's my understanding, but likely there'd be further discussions with the region on that.
And the city manager just has a comment there.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Reid and the rest of Council, further to Brooke's comments, I think it's important to note that the legislation also doesn't allow you to differentiate between cigarette smoking and cannabis smoking. So if you're going to ban one thing, you're actually banning them both. So the enforcement is against both tobacco and cannabis. You can't split the two.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much. Councillor Montero, you have the motion for this item.
Your Worship, yes I do. It was moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Adshade. Recreation retail cannabis. That the report recreation retail cannabis be received and that Council permits the establishment of retail stores for recreation cannabis in the City of Cambridge. In other words, opt-in. And that Council adopts a recreational cannabis retail store municipal committing to the criteria outlined by the attachment on Report 19033, and further that commenting in the authority to be the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario to be delegated to the city planner or designate. Can I speak to it?
Thank you. You may speak to it.
Thank you, Your Worship. If you were to ask me this question 8.5 years ago, I'd say no. But it's a legal product, and I remember you approaching me about 2 or 3 weeks ago where I stood on this. And I told you right off the bat, and even before hearing from other municipalities, that we should opt in. The thing is the way I look at this, and being a former police officer, is a safe supply. Or, on the other hand, the black market, the possibility of contaminated supply. It's a legal product. We got to get our heads around it. I'm all for this because we would stand alone, especially in our region, from what I understand. And my biggest concern is location S2, but this is something for us to look at later down the road if we are one of the municipalities that's going to have one. Right now, apparently it's only 25 or 27 or whatever the number is very minimal. We don't even know if we're going to get one. So I'm for opting in, and I'm going to agree with the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Devine.
Yes, thank you, to the Chair. I agree with opting in. As Councillor Montero had said, it provides for a safe supply of product. Right now we're hearing stories across the country where people are purchasing cannabis and getting very ill. Opioids, fentanyl, etc., sprayed on it to the point where there has been some deaths. So it is a safe supply, and this really is no different than Prohibition in the 20s and 30s. Alcohol was a banned product at the time. People were making moonshine or booze in their backyard, selling it. People were going blind, getting very sick and dying. So we need to opt in to control the product, and it's to the betterment of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Madam Chair. I would have much preferred a government-led control model such as the LCBO, but unfortunately this government has given us very little choice. I would have also liked us to have followed alcohol use laws rather than the smoking bylaws. As you know, you can't drink in your car, you can't drink alcohol walking down the street, etc. It would have given us a much better control over the use of cannabis. I am in favor of the motion. As other councillors have said, product safety is a big one. The harm crime reduction is important, and future provincial funding will help. But to me, the deciding factor was the fact that all our neighbors have decided to opt in. Kitchener, Waterloo, the region, and the different townships. I would have voted against this if they had voted to opt out and we were the only community in this area that was going to opt in. I think it's important that we try to maintain some consistency throughout the region, and by opting in tonight, we'll have done that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Adshade.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Councillor Wolf just took the words right out of my mouth. It's basically what I was going to say too. Is I am supporting the motion. I'm supporting it for safe supply and to get rid of the black market influence. But I have some real concerns about the way the provincial government set up this legislation. As Councillor Wolf mentioned, I would much rather see the LCBO. I think that would have been in an area where it would be acceptable to all communities, and we'd be assured that it wouldn't be getting into the hands of minors. At this point, we're not. I know it says now 27, but we really have no idea in the future how many stores there could be and where they could be, and we are very limited in controlling that. So I have some concerns about that. And also, the 15-day consultation period to me is that's a really sad statement. There's no way. I know our staff is going to comment right away, but that doesn't give the community or the public any opportunity to consult or discuss their concerns in a 15-day period. So I am going to support this, as I said before, for safety, for funding, and the whole region is opting in, and to get rid of the black market influence. But I really have some concerns the way this was laid out. I would have much rather preferred the old LCBO model.
Thank you. Councillor Armetta.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, when I was thinking about this yesterday about which way I was going to vote, and I went out for a drive to reflect, which I often do, and I was on Highway 8, and an interesting thing happened. I got pulled over like everyone on the road, and what was there? A ride check. They were checking to see if I was smoking cannabis when I was driving, and I passed the test, had no cannabis in the vehicle, and I don't do it, so that part was all good. But I just thought the timing was interesting when we're discussing this tonight, and that I may lighten the mood a little bit too by sharing that. So I did consult with the residents of my ward, because I did campaign on doing that when I was asked a number of times throughout the campaign about which way I was going to vote on the issue. And it's really hard to know for sure where the ward truly stands, but I did knock on almost every door, and I did raise it at a lot of the time for the discussion, and I said, if you're not sure, give me a call. If you see me walking the dog in the neighborhood, stop me, or if you see me at the grocery store, we'll talk about it. And I did get quite a bit of feedback from residents in the ward, and a lot of residents are saying they want to opt out, so that is where I'm going to be voting. I don't think the community is unanimous on this, and I don't think our vote should be either. And I would estimate, based on the feedback that I've gathered, about 60% of my constituents oppose the opt-in. They want to opt out, and a lot of them have moved here from Mississauga and Oakville and Richmond Hill, places that are also opting out. And I think their councillors have opted out for a strong reason, because that's the feedback that they've received in those communities, and that has infiltrated into my ward with all the Toronto commuters moving there. And then there's about 40%, obviously, that would support the opt-in, and what they're saying to me is, we don't want it in our neighborhood. We're fine with opting in, but put it outside the neighborhood, like put it like in an industrial area or something like that. And as a city, we don't have control about where it goes, and I know that's not our fault, but it's something that the residents in my ward are very concerned about. So I had mentioned that approximately 60% want to opt out. On some streets, which I can actually name, but I won't, but there are some streets it's actually as high as 90%. And I was talking to some of my colleagues in Brampton, and in certain neighborhoods there, they're getting the same results. So I'm going to represent my ward. I'm going to vote to opt out, because that's what I've been gathering from the residents who live there. And I've had conversations, I'm like, the funding is not going to be there to the extent that it would be if we opt in, and a lot of them seem to be reasoning with that, and they kind of think that we're signing a blank check because it takes the control out of the municipality, at least from what they can see. And obviously there are concerns about it being close to the schools and within that 150 meters. So you're looking at approximately 9 to 12 homes from a school. About 9 homes if it's like 50-foot lot homes, 12 homes if it's 40-foot lot. So like it's still closer than what it needs to be, and there's a lot of concerns with that. And of course, the public consultation, that very short window of 15 days, and not having the decision made by council, these are concerns that people in my ward are raising. And then how the provincial criteria keeps changing. So they were looking at a number of stores. Now they're looking at, I guess we heard the 25 or 7 in some cases. So there's a lot of concerns about the changing criteria as well. So I'm very comfortable voting against this. I could fall on my sword because I'm pretty confident that it's where my neighborhood stands. And as I said, the city is not unanimous, so our vote shouldn't reflect that. And there's even a question about the black market, that it still could thrive in some respects because the marijuana is going to be heavily taxed. And people, they try to go where it's cheaper sometimes, although that may not always be the case, but there's a lot of people who go to the reserve where cigarettes are cheaper and things like that, right? So I'll leave my comments at that. Those are the reasons why I'm opposing it. I would like a recorded vote just so that my constituents know that I sided with them. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. This is an interesting question. Like Councillor Montero years ago, I would have been adamant against this because of my profession. And here we are today talking about whether we opt in as far as the sale of it is concerned in our community because it's legalized. It's very interesting that staff, along with the stakeholders, including the police, have come up with the same report and have all recommended that we opt in. And staff have done an excellent job in preparing the report and their due diligence as far as researching and making a recommendation as to what they feel is best for us and for our community. As I listened to the presentations, I was very interested to hear from both Brooke Lambert and from Chief Larkin that by opting in, we protect ourselves from illicit drug use. We don't eliminate that, but we do protect ourselves, or we protect our community from illicit drug use. There's a level of protection from organized crime because we all know that drug offenses are related to organized crime. We have a safe supply, which is can help us as far as our health is concerned. Product safety is so important because we've all heard about people who use various drugs that have other drugs added to them, and we've heard about what happens with that and the impact of that. We have control in the background of the individuals who will be selling has been checked and has been an extensive background check has been done on these individuals to make sure that they are the proper ones to be running the stores, to be handling the product and those kinds of things. We heard that it will reduce, we don't think it will eliminate, but certainly it will reduce the illegal dispensaries, and that is key. Because if we have illegal dispensaries within our community, it is very difficult to control them, as we've experienced over the past months, and to make sure that we have a safe product, in my mind, is more important. And I would much rather see a safe product than have the illegal dispensaries showing up and not knowing where the product comes from. And this is a big concern of our community. I think it's important that the police have agreed to this. I think it's important that our own staff have come up with the same recommendation. And as Chief Larkin said, it's not a healthy lifestyle. And we're not promoting it because it's a healthy lifestyle, but we're promoting it because we think that it's better than having illicit drugs out on the street, which could create problems for our community. We do need to pause and take a look at a larger, better healthcare system, especially for our young people. And I think by legalizing this and by having our own retail stores, we do have some control on it. And I would rather have control on it than have it be out of control and not know what's happening to anybody within our community. So I will be supporting the opt-in recommendation that's been presented this evening.
Thank you, Council. And if I may just add my own comment at the end, I just wanted to thank everybody here for the work they've done on the file and for the opinions that we've had, not only from our residents, but our staff and our community organizations and council. It has been a very interesting debate, and I would have to say that the safe legal option for our residents who choose to consume is the way I want to go forward. So I will be voting in favor of opting in. I wanted to make a couple more comments as well. On some of our reports, we did have no opinion given from some of our organizations in the community, but quietly they came to me and said, I support a safe legal option for my constituents or for the members of my particular organization, but didn't really want to put that out there. I also felt that when we first had the police speak to us, when the mayors had a briefing a few weeks ago of all 7 regional municipalities, the police were asking, if possible, to try and ensure that the region hopefully would all vote in one way, whether for or against, preferably for, and you heard Chief Larkin's comments about this, but it would make it a little more simplified for their work in order to try and do some enforcement around these pieces. So I am very comfortable with opting in, and with that being said, I'm going to call the question. And it's a recorder's vote.
You can hit the go.
Okay, there's no further comments. Thank you. We're going to call the vote. It'll be recorded as requested. All those in favor?
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So through the chair, members of council, as requested by Madam Mayor, you can place your vote now on the main motion. Thank you. And the motion carries 7-1.
Thank you. And for those in the audience, Cambridge will be opting in. We're going to return to our previous item regarding Bill 66. Thank you very much for your patience on that. We've had the delegation and some questions. And Councillor Wolf, you have the motion for this item.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Reid. And I'll read it. Bill 66, Restoring Ontario's Competitiveness Act, 2018. The Cambridge Council receive report number 19-022, CDE Bill 66, Restoring Ontario's Competitiveness Act, 2018 for information. And that the City of Cambridge opposes the proposed changes to the Planning Act as set out in Bill 66, Restoring Ontario's Competitiveness Act 2018, as it fails to adequately protect human health and safety, and in particular, the safety of the City of Cambridge's drinking water resources. And that Council urges the Government of Ontario to reconsider the proposed changes to the Planning Act, including an open for business planning bylaw as outlined in Bill 66. And that should there be any proposed changes to the Planning Act through Bill 66, that Section 39 of the Clean Water Act 2006 continue to apply to any proposed bylaw. And that the City of Cambridge reaffirms its support for the principles of the countryside line and the protection of environmentally sensitive lands to appropriately manage growth through comprehensive planning review, analysis, and community consultation. And further, that Council reaffirms its support for meaningful public consultation
on all land use planning, decision-making matters, and the continuing support to appropriately manage growth that achieves the protection of source water, farmland, and sensitive natural areas. Be it further resolved that notwithstanding the future adoption of Bill 66, the City of Cambridge will not exercise the powers granted to it in Schedule 10 to pass open for business planning bylaws at the expense of environmental protection, and that Report 19-022 CD and a copy of this motion be sent to the Honourable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the Honourable Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Honourable Andrea Horvath, Leader of the New Democratic Party, John Fraser, Interim Leader of the Liberal Party, Mike Schreiner, Leader of the Green Party, Cambridge MPP Belinda Carlihalios, Kitchener South Hespeler MPP Amy Fee, and the Association of the Municipalities of Ontario. And speaking to the motion?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so that was quite a mouthful, and you all have it in your papers in front of you. I would say that in the last, since December, all of Council have had several emails and all opposing Bill 66. This has really stirred up people who want to support the environment. I also have a letter here from CFUW, which is Canadian Federation of University Women, our local chapter, and I sit on the Cambridge Advisory, the Environmental Advisory Committee, and in your package there is a letter from them. And I'll just read one sentence from that, and that is, the Cambridge Environmental Advisory Committee urges Cambridge Council to not support Bill 66, but to continue adopting strategies, policies, and bylaws that make strong commitments to the environment and the protection of the water, wildlife, green spaces, and rural agricultural communities that make Waterloo Region unique. Tonight we heard from Stephanie from Rare, and I think over and over we have heard that the protection that we have of our green space, of our environment, of our wildlife, this is what makes our city so special, and we don't want to lose that protection. We learned the lessons from Walkerton. We have had our own environmental spills. We need to make sure these don't happen. We need to give us more protection with climate change and a changing environment than before, not less. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments from council members? Councillor Montero.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I want to thank Councillor Wolf for preparing that motion. She went over it a fine-tooth comb, and talked to her earlier in the day and a couple of days ago about it, and I'm in full support of her motion, and that I'm completely against the bill, especially Schedule 10. So this is a no-brainer, and just to emphasize, we've been, not several emails, we've been bombarded by emails over this bill, so it was an average of 10, 15 a day. So we got the message loud and clear, although the message was pretty clear. But I'm in full support of the our motion, and I'm agreeing with it.
Thank you. Councillor Armetta.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a lot of concerns with the legislation. I certainly do. I do have a comment or a question first. Have our staff had a chance to read it and like develop an opinion? Or I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but
Yes, we've got an answer from staff here.
Okay. Sorry to put you on the spot, Gary.
Well, it's not putting me on the spot. I mean, Councillor, yes, absolutely. The staff have reviewed the legislation. They have provided the report that I believe is with you tonight. And the question, if you have specific questions, we'll respond to them as they come along.
Are there any pieces of the legislation that are good, or would they be concerned with the whole thing?
I think there's, sorry, Your Worship, through you, I think from an operational standpoint, we were pleased to see the issue with respect to the exemption of the city regarding being deemed a contractor. Okay. That helps us from an operational standpoint and a cost standpoint. But I mean, I think report is self-explanatory with respect to the comments of staff on the various parts of the legislation. As being an omnibus bill, if you can be appreciated, it's quite encompassing. It jumps from stem to stern on various areas and pieces of legislation. But it has been reviewed, and staff's comments as they apply to the municipality are included in the report.
Okay, thank you, Gary. So just a quick comment, Your Worship. I will support the motion because I do have a lot of concerns with the legislation. I'm also thinking it's probably not even needed because generally when the province is trying to attract employment, a lot of the time if you want something to happen, you can usually find a way. Like, I think back to when Toyota went to Woodstock, for example, and the city there was at a land. They were able to get the county together in the township, and they found a way to have enough land for Toyota to go to Woodstock and extend the services. And they did it all very quickly, a process that would take a number of years. They were able to do very quickly, and they were also able to protect a lot of the environmental lands in the area. So I'm confident that really we're able to streamline things and get employment while protecting our natural areas. So I'll support the motion that Councillor Wolf put forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Your Worship. Many people have spoken in this and in support of this. Of course, we support it because our official plan is what needs to guide us, and this legislation goes against our official plan. So I think it would be great if we had a unanimous vote on this. I think it shows then that we are joining with other municipalities who have found this distasteful, who have found that they do not wish to have business override the sensitive areas that we're trying to protect, to override our water concerns, to override the protection of our farmlands. So I'm hoping that all of us will support the resolution that Councillor Wolf and myself have brought forward.
Thank you. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's all been said tonight. I'm against Bill 66. Cambridge and Waterloo Region have a reputation for preserving our unique green space, our environment, and our sensitive areas. We are leaders, and we have been recognized as such for doing the right thing. I support the motion that's been prepared by Councillor Wolf tonight as well.
Thank you very much, and thank you, councillors, for your comments. I myself feel very strongly to oppose the bill, really because of the water protection and protection of our environmentally sensitive lands. That's a very important piece. I also felt that the planning authority and the comments from the public on our planning process are still values that we all hold dear. And I can say to this full room here for Planning and Development meeting that we, by this motion, are really upholding the values you've asked us to uphold. And that's that your voice in any planning-related decision is very important. So although there are a couple of pieces of this bill that I do approve of, certainly the motion tonight I'm prepared to support. And with that, I'm going to call the question and a recorded vote.
Through the chair, the motion passes unanimous 8-0.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on. Councillor Mehta, you have the motion for the confirmatory bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. Move Myself and seconded by Councillor Wolf. Confirmatory bylaws printed.
Any comments from council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Councillor Devine, you have the motion to close the meeting.
A motion to adjourn at 7:08, seconded by Councillor Michael Mann.
Thank you. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you. That